So I think at this point it'd be helpful, Cynthia, if you could share with us what a typical morning looks like for you. Which of these beverages are you consuming? And then go through what you'd eat in a day. Obviously it's going to be different day to day, but what could that look like?
It's a great question. It's one I'm asked frequently. So when I get up in the morning, I have about 12 ounces of filtered water, and I have the first set of electrolytes that I'll add into my water. And that's just a given. I'm not a coffee drinker, but I do have bitter tea. This morning I had black tea. Tomorrow I may have green tea. If you don't love the taste of bitter teas, I encourage you to drink it with a straw. That's how I actually learned how to drink them and enjoy them, because there's so many benefits that you get from these beverages that it's worth it to find a way around it. If you don't like bitter coffee, like plain coffee, if you've been putting cream and sugar, the two things that you can do that will not break a fast but can, impact the flavor profile of coffee. Number one is sea salt. You can add sea salt or you can add cinnamon, and cinnamon will actually increase insulin sensitivity. So that's another benefit. I haven't actually added them to the bitter teas, but I'm sure you could do the same as well. I just prefer to have them straight up. So for me, I've been actually, during the past 2 years, I've been breaking my fast a little earlier, depending on how physically active I am. So yesterday was a leg day. I broke my fast at 10 a.m. I closed my window at 6. So at 10 a.m. yesterday, I actually had a protein shake, which I don't normally do, but it was one of those very busy media days. And so I had a protein shake with about 40 grams of protein. And I had that with probably half a cup of blueberries, because it was a leg day. I can have a little bit more discretionary carbs. And then my next meal, I sat down and actually had chicken breast. I had broccoli. I had a little, even though I tend to be dairy intolerant, I do tolerate grass-fed butter. And so that was, the second meal. So I'm always aiming for anywhere from 40 to 50 grams of protein with each meal, which means my protein portions are quite large. And then later in the afternoon, I actually had some bison ragu, which was delicious. I had that over some cauliflower rice. And then I closed my window. And sometimes in my home, because I have teenagers and they're not back from sports until in the evening time, oftentimes I'm sitting with them and I've already closed my window, but they understand that I eat within a compressed feeding window, and that works for me. And there's a lot of research to demonstrate that aligning your feeding windows with chronobiology. So when it's light outside, we eat. When it's dark outside, we don't. Not eating, within 3 to 4 hours of bedtime. I trend all my data on my Oura Ring. I'm not affiliated with Oura. I just love tracking data. I'm a little bit of a nerd. And so I can look at, like, when I have meals later in the evening and how it disrupts my sleep. And that's what works for me. So every person that's listening may need to augment based on, their needs, personally, professionally, and otherwise. They may need to adjust their feeding and fasting windows a little bit differently. Certainly, if I was still in the hospital seeing patients and in clinic, I wouldn't have the degree of flexibility that I have. And I acknowledge that. But I do have plenty of clinicians and people that have very demanding jobs that do intermittent fast around their work schedule. They just have to be a little more regimented because they may not get as many opportunities to eat. But on a given day, I aim for 100 grams of protein easily. I don't count my carbs, but I do carb cycle. So I always have 1 or 2 days out of the week where I tend to be higher carbohydrate. And by high, it's not nearly what the average American is doing. The average American is anywhere from 200 to 300 grams of carbs a day. I'm probably on a higher day, probably 75 or 100. I'm not ketogenic, but I generally my happy place is about 50 total carbs a day. And that's, I've gotten to a point, I've been doing this for so long that I can eyeball my portions. But when I was doing this, new several years ago, it was a little bit more measuring and kind of tinkering to find where the sweet spot was for me.
If you enjoyed that clip, press here for the full episode. I'll see you over there.
On a lot of levels, I'm truly grateful because intermittent fasting gave me back my life. Like I say all the time, I feel more energetic than I did 15 years ago.